first perfect big man that's ever created. Can
The
shoot.
NBA has a Wemby problem, and it's only getting worse. Imagine you are a professional NBA player. You have trained your entire life for this moment. You are faster than almost every human being on the planet, stronger than most, and you have spent thousands of hours perfecting your footwork, your angles, your finishing. You drive toward the basket with everything you have, and then a 7'4", 22-year-old reaches out one impossibly long arm and erases you. Not blocks you, erases you, sends the ball somewhere into the crowd like your attempt never happened. Now imagine that this is not a rare occurrence. This is the routine. This is Tuesday night in San Antonio, and here's the number that breaks the human brain: 49.9%. Nearly 1 out of every 2 players who challenge Victor Wembanyama at the rim goes home with nothing. Not a foul, not a friendly roll, nothing. And somehow, that is still not the scariest part of what this kid is doing to professional basketball. Victor Wembanyama was selected first overall by the San Antonio Spurs in the 2023 NBA draft. He came in with extraordinary hype, the kind that suffocates most players before they ever touch an NBA floor. He did not get suffocated. In his second season, 2025-26, Wembanyama led the NBA in blocks for the second consecutive year, recording 197 total blocks at 3.1 per game. The next closest player, Chet Holmgren, managed 1.9 blocks per game. That gap is not a margin. That is a different category of basketball entirely. He also recorded 66 steals, making him one of the most complete two-way forces the league has ever produced at any age, let alone at 22 years old. The numbers alone are historic, but the numbers do not fully explain what is actually happening on the court, and that is what this video is going to break down, from the regular season to the playoffs, piece by piece. We are building something special here at Hoop Action TV, real NBA breakdowns, no fluff, no manufactured takes. We are on the verge of hitting 1,500 subscribers, and if you have been watching this channel grow, you know what this community is about. Subscribe, hit the like button, drop a comment, and share this video, because the Wemby conversation is one every basketball fan needs to be having right now. Now let us get into it. De'Aaron Fox, one of the fastest guards in the NBA and a player who has gone up against the best in the league, put it this way about Wembanyama: he changes the whole dynamic of your defense and the other team's offense. That quote is not hype. That is a professional basketball player describing what it is like to play alongside and against someone who does not fit any existing template. The Bleacher Report captured it more bluntly. Victor Wembanyama is making NBA players look scared to attack the rim. And when you watch the film, when you break down the actual decision-making of opposing guards and forwards as they approach the paint, that description is accurate. Drives that would be automatic layups against any other center get pulled back. Fast breaks that should result in 2 points end in a pass out to the perimeter. The fear is real, it is measurable, and it is costing teams points every single night. Some people have compared Wembanyama to a combination of players the league has never seen put together in one body. The comparison that keeps circulating, "it looks like Kobe and Shaq mixed together," is the kind of statement that normally gets dismissed as internet exaggeration. Watch 5 minutes of film and you will stop dismissing it. At 7 feet 4 inches, Wembanyama executes jab step pull-up threes, fadeaway jumpers, spin moves off the post, catches lobs in traffic, and runs the floor in transition at a pace that has no business coming from a player his size. He is not a dominant center learning to shoot. He is a fully formed defensive weapon operating at the highest level of the sport while also being the most disruptive defensive presence in the entire league. Now let us talk about the defensive numbers in real depth, because this is where the case for something historically unprecedented gets built. 197 total blocks, led the NBA for the second straight season. His 3.1 blocks per game placed him more than a full block ahead of the second-place finisher. That is not a close race. That is dominance so complete that the conversation around block leaders essentially starts and ends with his name. But blocks tell only part of the story. The deeper number, the one that genuinely disrupts how you think about defensive value, is 547. That is how many opponents challenged Wembanyama at the rim during the 2025-26 regular season. He blocked 273 of those attempts, 273 out of 547. That is 49.9%, and the opponents who were not blocked. Many of them missed anyway, because the act of getting near Wembanyama forces players into uncomfortable, rushed, off-balance attempts. The effective field goal percentage against San Antonio drops below 50% with Wembanyama on the floor. That is not a coincidence. That is a player fundamentally altering the geometry of the opposing team's offense. The on-off numbers complete the picture. The San Antonio Spurs finished the regular season with a defensive rating of 110.4, good enough to rank third in the entire NBA. With Wembanyama on the court, that number dropped to 102.9. For context, the Oklahoma City Thunder led the entire league in defensive rating at 106.5. Wemby on San Antonio was 3.6 points per 100 possessions, better than the best defensive team in basketball. That is not an outlier stat or a small sample footnote. That is sustained excellence across hundreds of possessions, and it represents a level of individual defensive impact that the sport has rarely, if ever, seen. ESPN research documented that in Game 1 of the playoffs against the Portland Trail Blazers, Portland went scoreless on 11 consecutive contested attempts when Wembanyama was positioned to contest. 11 in a row. Players were not just missing shots, they were abandoning shots entirely. Drives converted into kick-out passes. Fast breaks slowed into half-court sets. The deterrence effect, the psychological weight of knowing that he is standing between you and the basket, functioned as an additional defensive player that Portland had no answer for. The regular season ended with a formal recognition that the league had never given to any player before. On the day the 2025-26 NBA Defensive Player of the Year award was announced, Shams Charania reported, Victor Wembanyama has won the 2025-26 NBA Defensive Player of the Year award unanimously. Every single first-place vote, not one dissenting ballot. In the history of the Defensive Player of the Year award, no player had ever received unanimous support. Wembanyama became the first, and he did it at 22 years old, making him the youngest player ever to win the award. This is not a matter of narrative or storytelling. The voters, coaches, executives, media looked at every defensive player in the NBA and agreed without exception that one player stood in a category by himself. When ESPN NBA wrote, Wemby has officially entered the best player in the world conversation, that was not a hot take. That was an accurate description of where the evidence had led. And then the playoffs started, and everything that happened in the regular season became prologue. Game 1 of the Spurs' first-round series against the Portland Trail Blazers established immediately that this was not going to be a competitive series in the traditional sense. Wembanyama scored 35 points in his playoff debut, the highest-scoring debut in San Antonio Spurs playoff history. De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle combined for 15 assists, a distribution of the ball that immediately signaled something important. This San Antonio team was not built around one player carrying the load. This was a system. The Spurs won 111-98, and it was not particularly close from the midpoint of the third quarter onward. Game 2 introduced the first real moment of uncertainty. During the game, Wembanyama took a hit that sent him to the locker room and into the concussion protocol. The Spurs, who had been protecting a 14-point fourth-quarter lead, collapsed and lost the game. That is the bad news. The better news, and it matters enormously for understanding what this organization has built, is that Castle dropped 18 points, Fox added 17, and Vassell contributed 16. 3 different players stepped up in a game where the best player on the floor left hurt. Nobody panicked. Nobody abandoned the system. The Spurs lost, but they demonstrated something the rest of the league needed to see: depth. Game 3 is where the story took a turn that nobody in the league had scripted. Wembanyama did not play. San Antonio fell behind by 15 points in the third quarter. On paper, the series was suddenly in danger of becoming competitive. What happened next rewrote the narrative of this entire Spurs roster. Stephon Castle scored 33 points. Dylan Harper scored 27 points and pulled down 10 rebounds. San Antonio outscored Portland in the third and fourth quarters and flipped the momentum of the series entirely. The team that had just lost its best player by 3 points of defensive rating when on the road faced a significant deficit and won without him. That game sent a message to every team in the Western Conference. Stopping Wembanyama is not enough. There is no version of a defensive game plan against the Spurs team that works by focusing entirely on one player. Game 4 was the return, and it was emphatic. De'Aaron Fox scored 28 points. Wembanyama scored 27 points, blocked 7 shots, and recorded 4 steals. Portland had no answer for either of them independently. Having to account for both simultaneously was a structural impossibility. The ESPN research on Portland's behavior in the paint during this game documented a team that had stopped attacking with conviction, drives abandoned before they reached the rim, layups converted into kick-out passes, fast breaks deliberately slowed to avoid Wembanyama in transition. The psychological damage from Game 1 had become a permanent feature of how Portland was playing basketball. Game 5 closed the series. Fox scored 21 points, with 13 of those coming in the fourth quarter alone, exactly when the game needed to be decided. Julian Champagny delivered 19 points in a closeout performance that confirmed him as one of the more dangerous supporting pieces on this roster. The Spurs closed the series 4-1, and Legion Hoops captured Wembanyama's series totals with a number that stopped the basketball internet cold: 39 PTS, 15 Rev, 5 BLK. The league is genuinely in trouble. Everything about this team's playoff run points back to the same conclusion. Victor Wembanyama is the foundation, but the structure built around him is legitimate and deep. De'Aaron Fox is the co-star that makes Wembanyama impossible to defend with a single focus. Fox won the NBA Clutch Player of the Year award in 2023. He's a player built for high-pressure moments, someone who gets better as games get tighter. Doubling Wembanyama creates open lanes for Fox. Staying home on Fox creates open post-ups and lob opportunities for Wembanyama. There's no correct defensive answer. Stephon Castle anchored the offense in Games 2 and 3 when the team needed him most. His 33-point performance in Game 3 without Wembanyama was not a career fluke. It was a confirmation that San Antonio has a legitimate second option who can carry offensive load when necessary. Keldon Johnson won the NBA Sixth Man of the Year award this season, only the second Spur in franchise history to claim that distinction, joining Manu Ginobili. Johnson became the first player in Spurs history to score 1,000 bench points in a single season, finishing with 1,081. That is not a role player contribution. That is a featured offensive weapon operating from the second unit. Julian Champagny went undrafted. He was overlooked at every stage of his path to the NBA. This season, he set the Spurs' all-time single-season record for three-pointers, making 195 at 38.1% from distance. He also set the franchise record for most threes in a single game. An undrafted player operating as one of the most efficient shooters in San Antonio's history, breaking records that span decades of Spurs basketball. Dylan Harper, the second overall pick in the 2024 NBA draft, is shooting 39.6% on catch-and-shoot threes as a rookie, and his 27.10 rebound performance in Game 3 is the kind of breakout playoff moment that players build entire careers around. Harper is not close to his ceiling yet. That is the most unsettling part of what this roster represents for the rest of the league, and the depth goes further. With Wemby sidelined during Games 2 and 3, lineups anchored by Luke Kornet outscored their opponents by 15 points across those two games. The bench, the second unit, the players who do not start, they contributed meaningfully when it mattered. Clutch Points summarized it accurately. San Antonio doesn't look like a rebuilding team anymore. They look like the next dynasty. The honest question that needs to be asked is this: can a team this young actually win a championship? The historical record on this is consistent and worth acknowledging. Young rosters almost never win NBA titles immediately. The Golden State Warriors, who became the defining dynasty of the 2010s, won exactly one playoff series in 2013. They lost in the first round in 2014. Their championship did not arrive until 2015. Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green needed multiple playoff cycles of experience, failure, and adjustment before they were ready to hold the trophy. The Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan, the Los Angeles Lakers with Kobe and Shaq, every dynasty required a developmental window before the peak arrived. The San Antonio Spurs starting lineup averages under 26 years old. Wembanyama himself is 22. There's no Tim Duncan-level veteran leader currently installed beside him, someone who has been through finals runs, who has managed playoff pressure across a full career. But here's where the counter-argument holds real weight. Harrison Barnes is a veteran who has been to the NBA Finals. Luke Kornet brings experience and composure to a young locker room. De'Aaron Fox has the clutch player of the year on his resume, and demonstrated this postseason that pressure is not a problem for him. And behind all of it, head coach Mitch Johnson is operating with a culture that Greg Popovich built over decades. A culture of discipline, system basketball, and accountability that does not disappear because a coaching transition happened. The youth argument is real. The counter-argument is also real. What is not debatable is that this team is further along at this stage of their development than almost any comparable young roster in recent NBA history. Pull back to the largest possible frame now. There's a quote circulating, not a prediction made lightly, not a social media hot take, that states, 25 years from now, the GOAT conversation is going to start with three names: LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and Victor Wembanyama. Let that sit. LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and a 22-year-old who has played 2 NBA seasons. Here's what makes that statement worth examining rather than immediately dismissing. 49.9% rim block rate, the highest sustained rate in the modern era of NBA tracking data. An on-court defensive rating of 102.9, 3.6 points better than the league's best defensive team. A unanimous Defensive Player of the Year award, the first in the award's history at age 22. Playoff debut that produced 35 points, the highest in Spurs' postseason history. A 7-block, 4-steal performance in a playoff elimination game. And behind all of that individual production, a team that went for one in the first round while demonstrating the kind of systemic depth that contenders are built on. None of those are projections. None of those are narratives being constructed by people with a reason to hype a young player. Those are documented, verified results from one player across 2 NBA seasons. The conversation about where Victor Wembanyama ends up in the historical record of this sport is one that every serious basketball observer is now required to have. The evidence has accumulated to the point where ignoring it is no longer reasonable. 197 blocks, 3.1 per game, 49.9% rim block rate, unanimous DPOI, age 22. The NBA does not have a Wemby problem that shows up occasionally or in certain matchups. It has a decade-long structural problem, a player who is already the most dominant defensive force in the sport, surrounded by a young and developing roster that just went 4-1 in the playoffs without breaking, led by a coaching staff operating from a championship culture, entering what should be the ascent of his prime years. Nobody in the league has an answer for him right now. In 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, when the supporting cast has playoff miles on them and Wembanyama is in the peak of his career, that problem is only going to compound. The question is not whether San Antonio is going to be relevant. The question is how long the rest of the league has before relevance becomes something they are watching from the outside. If you enjoy real NBA breakdowns like this, you will like what is coming next on Hoop Action TV. We are about to cross 1,500 subscribers, and this community has been built on real analysis, no manufactured narratives, no empty takes. Subscribe right now if you have not already, smash the like button, and share this video with every basketball fan you know because this Wemby conversation is only getting started. And drop your prediction in the comments, conference finals, NBA finals, or is something even bigger coming for this San Antonio team? If you think Victor Wembanyama is already the most unguardable player in the NBA, comment and let the community know. If you think youth is still going to be the ceiling for this roster, make that argument below because that debate is exactly the kind of thing this channel exists for. Comment, share, let the basketball world know what Hoop Action TV is building.